Hello and welcome to Furious Driving, and this is a little brief video aimed pretty much specifically at my UK viewers because horror of horrors, on April 1st, road tax is a rising. Can you afford it? How bad is it going to be? Is the world going to end? Are you going to have to sell your car or crush it or just give it away because no one's going to want it? How bad is it going to be? Well, probably not that bad, to be perfectly honest, but there's a lot of misinformation and a lot of panic going around, so I thought it really ought to make a video to address this because, well, people just seem to be getting the wrong end of the stick about things and getting really worried about stuff they don't need to worry about. Before we go on though, there are two things I need to address. First of all, I'm going to be mentioning road tax quite a lot, and yes, I know it's not really road tax, it's VED or vehicle excise duty, and vehicle excise duty. I know it doesn't specifically go into just fixing the roads, it goes into the UK Treasury and is paying for all the other things. And if anyone comments that when I say road tax quite a lot, I'm just going to make a sorry tutting noise at you when I'm reading those comments. I know it's not technically road tax, but I'm going to call it road tax because it's easy and everyone knows what I'm talking about. Secondly, I'm going to reference the Daily Mail in a minute because they are the biggest bunch of hysterical pearl clutches you've ever met. And they will build the biggest mountain out of the smallest molehills, and I will be referred to them in the hysteria that's built up around this. And people in the comments have complained about me referencing the Daily Mail before as well. However, I used to work in the newspapers for a long time. I've got many years working sort of in Fleet Street, and so I think look, I'm quite qualified and justified in calling out the Daily Mail as being hysterical wind-up merchants. They are the original clickbaiters in print. So, Daily Mail, VED, I know, don't need to comment. Out the way at the beginning. Okay, so road tax. Everyone pays road tax apart from a few lucky people, but on April 1st this year it's going up, and there have been stories on the Facebook which are really spreading out of control. People are going to be paying things like £5,000 if you've got like a 5-litre Mustang, something someone mentioned to me today. It's going to be £5,000, which is just ridiculous. So I think there's a lot of misinformation that's just spreading around, getting out of control. So for some people there's going to be virtually no change or no change at all. For others there's going to be a bit of a change, but not going to be life-changing. So let's run through all the changes and all the different categories, and we'll start with the oldest and work up to the newest because that's where the biggest controversy I think lies with electric cars. So going back to 40 years old now, so 1985 and older, if you've got a 40-year-old plus car, good news. You're the freebie gang. You don't have to pay any tax at all because these are the historic vehicles. I own a couple of them. I love getting that reminder through the post. Do you wish to have 6 months of free or 12 months of free? Oh, maybe I'll go for 6 months of free so I can tick free twice this year and really get the most out of it. Anyway, that is not changing. Likewise, they are not changing the MOT exemption for 40-year-old cars at the moment. I still think that's a mistake, and 40-year-old cars should still have an MOT because you don't know what other people have done to a car. And everyone thinks they're better at fixing cars than they really are. Apart from bona fide classic specialists who really are experts, everyone else is probably okay or quite good or possibly terrible, and you don't really know. Anyway, now the next newest stage on, newer older cars, these are ones that are from 40 years old up to 2001, April 1st 2001. These have only got two categories. This is a sub 1.6 and plus 1.6, so bigger and a smaller engine. It's actually either 1550cc or 1549cc. I read this as two different figures when researching this video. I don't know why it's like 1550 or whatever, rather than just a straight 1.6. Who knows, this is the DVLA and HMRC. They have weird rules, weird reasons for things. Anyway, only two bands and only going up a little tiny bit. The sub band is going up £10 to £210, and the above 1.6 is going up £15 to £345. So it's going up a little bit. It's annoyingly expensive for cars that frankly are classics at this point. If you've got a car that's 39 years old or 37 years old, and it's from 1988 or whatever, that car is really is honestly a classic, and that should be in a reduced classic car rate or even a paper mile rate, because I've got several of cars in that age group, like my 90s Rovers and my 80s Volvo and Alfa and that kind of thing. They do a few hundred miles a year. I'd be surprised if I do more than 2,000 miles a year in those things, but I'm still paying very high tax on those cars despite the fact they're barely moving. So often I only tax them like 3 months of the year just because it's a lot of money to not use them. Anyway, this isn't an argument about what they should or shouldn't be. This is a video about what is, and that is what it is, 210, 345. Now, next, newest stage on. This is where we get into older, newer cars rather than newer, older cars. This is from 2001, April the 1st, up until April the 1st, 2017. This is most of your average used car fleet. This is where things get a little bit more complicated because there are quite a lot of bands in this one. There are in fact 13 bands in this one, lettered from A, which was £0, up to M, which is the most polluting. And there's, yeah, little increments all in between. So yeah, lots and lots of bands. And this is all depending on your grams per kilometre CO2 emissions rather than your engine size or anything like that. But the big change here is that there is no longer a free band. Band A, cars which emit less than 100 grams of CO2 per kilometre, which is most hybrids, were free, and they're now not free. But it's only 20 quid, so you're not exactly breaking the bank. Still, you are saving a lot of money on your fuel because you've got a hybrid, so hopefully you can afford an extra £20. But the rest of these bands are going up around £5, £10, £15. The big one is that £20 at the beginning for the cheapest cars. So again, nothing too terrible. The worst of the worst, £735. I think it was £720 before, which is horribly expensive for a car that's probably worth only a couple of £1,000, largely in part because of this tax thing. So some really exciting, fun cars that are really being priced out of the market. 3 litre Subarus tend to be in this top category, and there's so many other really interesting cars which aren't worth big money, but let's hope someone buys them and drives them a couple months a year just to keep them safe, because otherwise they are going to get crushed. But anyway, that is bands A to M of cars 2001 to 2017. Now, getting into the newest cars, this is April 1st, 2017 up until the present day. Any car registered from April 1st, 2017 falls into this category, as do existing electric cars. So the big news is that everything registered from this date on is going to be paying a flat rate of £195, regardless of its motive power. Petrol, diesel, LPG, hybrid, or indeed EV. £195 flat rate. And that's regardless of emissions and fuel type, which some regard as good, some regard as bad. I just think it's quite a fair thing to do, because EVs have been getting a free ride for a long time. Which seems a little bit unfair, because the government were giving electric cars a tax break to try and push them into the market, make them more popular, make company car buyers and so forth take on a new EV rather than an ICE car. The thing is though, this is a tax break for people who can already afford quite a lot. If you can buy a new electric car, and the first ones were all very expensive, you can probably afford a couple £100 extra a year. So it seems a little unfair that the people who are further down the food chain in terms of buying cars and affording cars are having to be stuck with a bill that people with lots of money are getting a freebie on. It's like the rich avoiding tax because they can afford good accountants. So anyway, it does kind of level the playing field and make things a little bit more fair, if you like. So going back to the EVs, and because this is the most contentious part of the new road tax budget, if your EV was registered between April 1st, 2017 and April 1st, 2025 and moving forward, it will be £195 a year to tax, which isn't too bad. If you've got a £100,000 electric car, 200 quid, probably not that bad, considering what you're saving on fuel and servicing and the rest of it, not too bad. If your EV is older than 2017, that falls into the 2001 to 2017 category, and it falls into the bottom A category, so it was free, now £20, which I hope you'll agree isn't too terrible. I think where some of the confusion is coming in is that there are still 2 other levels of tax. There's first year tax, like an extra bit of purchase tax. Well, it isn't really purchase tax, but the year a new car is registered, there is an additional tax. And that again varies depending on the emissions of the car. This is where electric cars do continue to win a little bit of a favour, because if it's a zero emissions car, it's £0 at new registration. If it's a high emission car, again this is a sliding scale depending on how much emissions you're emitting, the worst of the worst pay £2,745, which is possibly where some of the scaremongering is coming from. People hearing the multi-thousands thing and thinking it's every year. It's not, it's only in year 1. And the chances are that year 1 tax will be bundled into your lease or your purchase, so you're adding it into the monthly costs of the car's entire time you own it. So you're not really going to notice that one. Really, you can factor that into pushing the ticket price of the car up, and I think the idea behind that is they want to push electric cars still. The other tax, which is not going away and will be £425, is your luxury car tax, your expensive car tax. If your new car costs £40,000 or more sticker price in the windscreen when you buy it brand new, you have to pay this additional £425 on top of whatever tax band it falls into for the first 5 years of its life. And this is very annoying because it's actually quite hard to buy a car for less than £40,000 these days, unless it's like a Clio or, I was going to say Fiesta, but they don't make Fiestas anymore, do they? So it's really not a lot I was looking at a Focus Estate the other day, thinking, wow, that looks like a really handy family car. But a Focus Estate is over £40,000. This is a mid-size, mid-range, very ordinary family car. So for the first 5 years, you've got to pay your road tax at whatever rate it is, depending what engine you spec, plus £425. And when you buy a second-hand car, that still applies. I've been caught out with this buying a second-hand car for cheap and discovering that because it was only 4 years old, I still had another year of extra £400 tax on it. Was not impressed. And going back to the EVs, there is a strong argument, aside from the social factors behind taxing EVs, that if you can afford an EV, you can probably afford a little bit more to go towards taxing it. The fact is, EVs are heavier, so they do cause more damage to the roads. If you want to call this road tax and think that the road tax should go to paying and repairing the infrastructure of the country, then perhaps the cars which are doing perhaps the most damage to it should be paying a little bit more, because they've been getting a free ride for a long time. They're getting free on-street charging and parking in a lot of places as well. But hopefully this will have answered all the questions and straightened out all the what-ifs, because yes, it is going up, but it goes up every year. It's an inflation thing. But the big difference is, of course, yes, electric cars are now no longer going to be the freebie that they were, but it's not a huge amount of money. And if you can afford an EV, you can probably afford either 20 quid or 195 quid. If a Daily Mail reader who's posted on Facebook tells you it's going to be 5 grand or 10 grand or £1,000,000 to tax your gas guzzler, tell them to shut up. Send them a link to this, because it's not. Panic over. And hopefully this has been a useful video rather than my usual dropping spanners in the dark and getting cross with cars that I can't fix. So thank you for watching. Like, subscribe as per usual. More car reviews, more car repairs coming up very shortly indeed. And don't panic about your car tax. Goodbye.